Welcome, ladies, to the Real Estate InvestHER Show, providing inspiration, strategies, and insight to empower women investors to live balanced and financially free lives. Now, here are your co-hosts, Liz and Andressa.
So in today's episode, ladies, we have Sandra Dungee Glenn. She's from Philadelphia and doing a lot of important work around holistic real estate development. What I loved about today's episode was that we talked about what does that look like? We got really specific. And really what it's about is obviously making the right decisions from a real estate investing perspective, but I should say, and doing right by the community and the people in that community.
And they develop a social metric scorecard. Of course, the numbers need to work, right? But they also have a checklist of things socially impacting the community that people should take in consideration. This is very informative and eye-opening, I would say, also, in order for us to create a new norm. That social impact is also a line item on our spreadsheets.
Welcome back, ladies. This is Liz.
And this is Andressa.
Welcome back to the Real Estate InvestHER Show, where our mission is to empower women to live a financially free and balanced life on their own terms. Right, Andressa? We do that in lots of different ways. And we're so pumped to have Sandra Dungee Glenn with us here today. We're going to be talking about real estate development. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things to say, how do you do this in a holistic way and not just make money, but make money and make a difference in communities that you're investing. So excited to jump into your story, Sandra. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Happy to have the conversation.
Awesome. And as we always do for all of you amazing listeners that have been with us, whether you just started listening to our podcast or if you've been with us since 4 years ago, right? And just 300 plus episodes later, we like to get connected to you to share one quick tip. We try to go as deep, but as brief as we possibly can, if that's possible. And just to get connected to all of you with something coming up for us. So Andressa, what do you have going on, my friend?
I'm going to talk about play date.
We're going to talk about play dates. All right, good.
Play date. Because, you know, when you take your kids to play dates, to public restaurants, that's when you truly see the result of your parenting skills per se, right? They're put to the test, right? How they're behaving, how they're eating, how they're interacting with another kid. So Lorenzo and we went up to a play date to my new friend Alexa that I met at the soccer field. I mentioned it to you, Liz. So Alexa is one of ours, you know, the type of person that it's vulnerable, super full of energy. Alexa, if you're listening, you're one of ours. Okay. And then we were eating, and then at the end we were doing a game where say I would rather this or that. And then Alexa served a dessert, and my son took a bite of it, and he looked at me and said, I don't like this at all. First, I wanted to strangle him right there, right? It's like, dude, are you serious? And then then Alexa started laughing about it, and I was like, Lorenzo, when I had to say it to him, when you don't like something, you just don't say that. She made it. It sounds a little rude. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, yeah. So you don't know that, right? And then we ended up talking about something else, about what failure truly is. And then Lorenzo says, but let me tell you something. When we make a mistake, that does not mean we failed. That means that we learned something. Fail is when people don't try. And I was like, okay, redeem myself here.
Like the noise came out.
And then I was like, oh, thank you, God. At least one thing, you know, went through him. But the reason why I'm saying this to you guys is that we learn so much through podcasts, conferences, and sometimes we don't get an opportunity to practice, right? So if you learn different skill sets to have tough conversations, or to manage your time. Guess what? You're going to be tested. Do you have your boundaries set? You're going to be tested. The universe is going to be tested. And I looked at Lorenzo being tested there. I was like, this is going to be challenging, right? It's going down the hill. My kid just really being ungrateful over here is not working. But take your time when you're being tested with your time, with anything in your life. Just remember the training that you had and where you're going. Have some grace, because you're going to drop the balls, but something is going to get in, and not just for you, but for the kids too. But I just wanted to share, because I was like, okay, Jesus, are we doing the right thing here, right? Or not? Just be patient, because one positive note might come along.
I love it. I love that. That's great. And you're just like, it's a journey as a parent, right? To keep making sure your kiddos are actually taking in what you're hearing and doing something with them. So that's awesome. Love that.
And I think it's a wonderful story about the balance of it, because on one hand, there was a little something that he missed, but the other piece he got. And so that journey, and it's not, and I think the lesson that I hear from it, it's not an even field journey. It is so tumultuous, up and down, and that piece of it came through with your story. So thank you.
Welcome to real estate investing, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
So Sandra, as we jump into you and your story, what has been the hardest and longest lesson what lesson has taken you the longest to learn?
Patience and trust. That I tend to be a impatient person. I've learned patience over the years. I'm a Virgo, and so I have this thing about everything has to be in order, and I can make it work on my schedule in my time, and that is not life. So understanding the ebb and flow about patience, and then to the point about doing all that I can. And I'm a woman of faith, and so God is a very constant, real, day-to-day part of my life. And so understanding after I do all I can, that there is a level of trust that has to come in to say that there are things outside of my or our control when I think about our company. And so we do what we can, and then we have to trust that we're moving in the right direction. But that trust, absent sight, is very difficult. Before it materializes, believing that the ingredients have been sown in and it will bear fruit, that's a difficult thing. So that is a lesson that I'm still going through. I can't say that I've learned it. I'm still going through it, and I find that with each iteration, more trust is being required and more patience is being required before getting to the expected outcome. So that's my the journey, part of the journey that I'm on.
It's funny because yesterday I was listening to Mel Robbins' podcast, which I highly recommend to people. And she was talking about patience. And then she's like, don't you dare to be impatient. And I was like, whoa, right? Don't you dare to become impatient. And then the way that she said, and then to say, okay, I'm not getting it, what I needed, therefore I'm just gonna let go of this, or my journey is not coming as fast as I wanted, therefore it's not working. And then she said, you need to take a deep breath and really think and imagine, how about if you are just one step away from achieving that? Like, think about like the miner, right? Giving up, and the gold is right there, but you're like, I want it now. And I think that, Sandra, what you're talking about, like the balancing out, women put a lot of pressure on themselves to create and build this portfolio in real estate in a way that is not holistic, and it's not serving women anymore. So today we're going to talk about how can we create a holistic approach. And we stand for women to create and build wealth on their own terms. So for you, can we break down what does a holistic approach when it comes down to investment looks like to you?
Wow. I can give a long answer to that and a short answer, and so I'll try to go in the middle. Coming to real estate, and for me, and I'm not a real estate professional, I put that on the table. My background has been in public policy and electoral politics and nonprofit, community organizing, even education. And so for me, holistic, first of all, seeing my city, Philadelphia, the evolution over the 6+ decades that I've now lived here, from a city where, as a Black resident in Philadelphia, and we're still about 45% of the population here, the largest demographic group, seeing many of the neighborhoods that were part of my childhood, and stable home ownership, solid, holistic, meaning that you had businesses there, you had families living there, the schools were good. My mother went to the same elementary school I went to. We had the same first grade teacher, so that gives you some idea about stability. Much of that is gone. That there's a lot of displacement and disintegration of what I think of as anchors in neighborhoods. In Philadelphia, home ownership among Black residents has been declining. The wage level, there are big gaps in wealth in the city. So the health indicators, we know about issues around violence and other health indicators. So when you think about quality of life, which is part of holism to me, quality of life is being threatened in a lot of ways. And so what brought me into this arena of real estate was understanding, for me, growing up, the connection between stability of place. I grew up in the house my mother grew up in, that my grandparents bought, when they came to the city. And so 50, 60 years later, we're still in that same home. My block was 98% homeowners. And so we knew the neighbors. They knew me from the time I was born to the time I was adult. That was disappearing. And that does a lot to people emotionally and socially. There's a trauma that is attached to that. And so unless we can think about how we restabilize neighborhoods, how we re-anchor communities, these social ills we talk about are going to continue to plague us. So our approach to real estate with the Growth Collective, and we can talk more about exactly what that is, but I come to it as one of 3 partners who brought together a group of Black developers who are thinking about, as you look at using the land, the real estate, whatever you're building, how does that re-establish assets and anchors in communities that are about, yes, housing, but what about healthcare and access to quality healthcare? What about access to healthy food? What about a place for you to start your business? So when you think about shared workspaces or entrepreneurial hubs, how do you use the real estate, as we call it, as the portal to change the quality of life, the health, wealth, and wellness in a neighborhood, in addition to being a physical asset? So that's holistic development. When you can use the real estate, the physical asset, to address health, wealth, and wellness of the people there, and you're investing in them, and as opposed to displacing them, because gentrification has been a very real driver here in Philadelphia too. So that's what I think about, and as we've been defining holistic development.
I love that, Sandra. And we got our start in investing in Trenton, New Jersey, much smaller urban community, obviously, than Philadelphia, but in and of itself, there was such a development of the property, but it's obviously development of the community too, right? And I'm curious to get your insight into this, because I think so many people listening and watching, especially the women we serve, want to be part of the solution. So they get it, right? They get what you're saying. And probably most of the people listening would say, yeah, how do we do that? And so my next question, though, to you is not just how, but, we become good at what we do. So let me preface my question. We become what we good. We know how to redevelop this property, right? Structurally, get the right contractors, get the plan together, what's the highest and best use of the property, et cetera. what you're speaking about is really the true gem of holistic development of a community, which is completely needed. How does someone who is really a true investor, knows real estate, become part of the solution without knowing all those pieces? Because they're not going to know exactly what's needed from a healthcare perspective, from a from a food perspective, all the pieces of the puzzle of like really serving communities in the way you just spoke to. How do they kind of stay in their lane and partner with others? I guess that's the question I want to ask you in developing that, because we've got to keep people doing what they're good at, also considering all the other pieces, right?
Well, my honest answer is that's why we created the Growth Collective. I come from, as I kind of talk about, a policy background, if you would, kind of community organizing policy background. I connected with two partners. One of my partners, Taif Smith, we call him a serial entrepreneur because he started a lot of businesses, but he is a developer. He and his partner have been developing real estate properties in Philadelphia. My other partner, Stephen Sanders, has 30 plus years in financial management, in investment management. He understands money and institutional investments and, everything from hedge funds to all these other vehicles and products that I can't even call. And so we came together around the concern about what's going on in our neighborhoods in Philadelphia. And so the three of us kind of are a good mix of skill sets. But then we went out and said, well, what's missing are the practitioners, the people like the women you're talking about who are actually out there doing it. And so what we ended up doing, literally 3 years to this month, we brought together a group of 7 Black developers who we just knew from our various parts of life and brought them into a room and said, hey guys, like, what are you doing? What do you see as being why we're seeing what we see in Philadelphia? What's going on? What's going on with you as you go out and develop? Because literally for me, it was truly a lesson because I didn't know development. And so when we brought them into the room, we heard 2 things. First of all, because these were Black developers working in Philadelphia, already trying to do the kinds of things and doing the kinds of things I spoke about, meaning envisioning projects that developed the property, but thought about a different and added use, added value to it. So they already had the vision. And that's the first thing. Where there's a will, there's a way. That's what I have found out in most of life. So if you really are committed to doing this, you really believe this is the way to go, then it is a matter, you're right, of how do I do it? How do I raise the money? And that was their other problem, getting access to the capital. And for a variety of reasons that we can go into, and we know women have a challenge in the marketplace with equity and really being seen as qualified and so forth. We know people of color. As a Black woman, I know what that is when people look at both your race and your gender and question whether you can do it, whether you know enough or smart enough or whatever. So our developers were struggling with that. So we've made the commitment to the Growth Collective, and we are out here now in the marketplace being the, let's say, the attractor of capital, because what we said is let's put their portfolio of projects together. Each of them individually have a track record. When we put their portfolio of projects together, they had over $400 million worth of projects in their combined pipeline. And that was more attractive to some levels of investors than just, let's say I have a project and it is $1 million, maybe it's, $750,000. That may not attract the capital, but this aggregate portfolio was more attractive. That's one thing. And we're out there, we've committed to both raising a fund. We've launched a fund to attract capital, equity capital. And we are looking at a variety of other capital sources that just are able to bring money to their individual projects. So helping them with the capital was one thing, and that's the walk we're doing. But on the other side, we found that we have had to move into this environment, as we call it, the ecosystem, and kind of create a whole different level of consciousness around what this view of real estate looks like compared to exactly what you started with, kind of more traditional. So we've been out there meeting with elected officials, and we've been meeting with the public agencies, and we've been meeting with the large real estate companies, and we've been meeting with the banks, planting the seed about this vision. And that's a lot of, so we are in some ways, proselytizing and being evangelistic about creating this message and creating a vision. And the climate around, let's be honest, with George Floyd, there's a kind of like awakening around inequity, racism, systemic racism has been a helpful backdrop because people are at least more aware of some of these barriers that need to be overcome and at least more open to thinking about what are possible solutions. And so we're just offering our approach as here is a strategy and a solution, not the only thing that needs to get done, but something that we have seen is valuable. Our developers are in neighborhoods working with residents to say, here's what you want us to do with these parcels that would be of value to you. And that collaboration has real value. And the Growth Collective, now we're going out and working with community organizations and elected officials ourselves to say, what's your vision around development? Don't just wait for something to come to you. Let's figure out how we can kind of attract developers to your vision about development. So that's how we're coming at it. And we are testing this model because we believe it has value. We've seen some real benefit from it, even in the short term, because we believe it's something that can be replicated in other markets, not just here in Philadelphia, but Cleveland and Chicago, to Detroit, Atlanta, Washington could all probably benefit from this kind of approach. So that's what we're testing out as well.
I love that. I want to talk about this awareness level, right? We have different situations that has happened in the past couple of years that was awakening for a lot of people, but some people are still sleepy. Sandra, sounds to me, right?
Wake up. Yes.
Well, it feels, one thing that I learned is like, it's not the African American community to start educating people about certain things that they should self-educate or seek for the education. That being said, I think that there is naming it like a denial of certain communities that this is real. The gap is real. So I just want to talk to you guys about this for a second, because what do you feel in terms of like enrollment of people, lenders, for example, right? I feel that it's just like, let's talk about, they don't even understand many times why a project like Liz and I, when we talk about the investor community, we get this all the time. Why do you even have that? I was like, what are you talking about, right? Minority. In your case is different, but talk to me about this level of awareness. You mentioned here that you were invited to speak on a panel. And I was like, what is happening here? So you said, I've spoken on panels with individuals who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I've been asked to fill the coffee, hang somebody's coat, and that happening in 2 different events. Like, that blows my mind that that's still happening. But I wanted to hear from you. What are the challenges that you guys are facing right now in order to get that project moving?
Well, to be honest with you, I would say, let me start with this. And I call myself the reluctant capitalist because a lot of my work has been kind of, like I said, around a social change. And so coming into this arena of real estate, I tease my partners about being figuring out capitalism for good, and there's good ways to use it. But I will say, first of all, it still has to pencil out these deals, and the projects still have to be financially feasible. They have to work by the numbers. So I would say that's the first thing. So we're not talking about people being philanthropic to the sense that, oh, we're just throwing money away. No. When 2 things I would say. One, that the projects themselves have to have real financial returns, and we have to be able to show that. Our developers have to be able to show that. And they have to be able to put their capital stacks together in a way that at the end of the day, there's going to be a return on the investment. That's one thing. The second thing I would say is when we look around Philadelphia in the neighborhoods we're talking about, we see people coming in there to extract value from these communities. So they see them, they know that there are ways to make money in these communities, but the view, and again, being very honest, whether it's because of a history of racism or discrimination, or just because capitalism really looks for a way to, I want to give the least and get the most out, how do we have to make sure that the decisions are in the hands of those who understand how to, in a sense, protect that value. So that's why we are so, I guess, embracing of our developers, because yes, these are business people who are running a business, but their commitment is, we have to run a business around certain ethics and principles. And yes, we are going to do projects that are produce a return, but they're also going to add value to these communities. And so the story that we have to take to the investors, though, they want to see the numbers. And so we are constantly working with our developers around, let's look at how we can manage your sources of money, your cost of borrowing, getting the city to make sure that that where there is available land, they prioritize uses of this land to be to the community benefit, reduce your cost of acquiring the land, getting site control. So how do we help you set the best project financial scenario in place so that when we go to the investment community, they can see a real return? So that's on one side. And then part of the other side is, as I said, kind of being the messages like this and in environments and in opportunities where we're helping people to make the connection that you can do well and you can do good. That maybe we could take a slower horizon about your return. Maybe it won't be 5 years. Can you invest for 10 years? Is that something you can do? And can we find patient capital as the first in money? And so that's where our foundations and some of our, let's say, government resources could be that first in dollar. And then the markets can kind of see and understand a little bit better. They feel that the risk has been minimized. So it's all of those things and honestly working all those angles that we are learning to do and figuring out how we bring our public officials alongside us, how we go out to our investment kind of like we have these private public kind of PIDC here in Philadelphia and help them to see how they can partner with us because they all have these mandates now about investing in quote unquote underserved communities. And so how they can do that in ways that bring return. So we're working both to change some of the decision makers and stakeholders understanding about this, but at the end of the day, making sure that we have projects that are financially strong.
That's great. There's so many different ways I want to take the next question. So I'm thinking about which one do I want to take in my head? I'm curious though, for the women listening, I'm thinking about, and we have a lot of women in the tri-state area, the Philadelphia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York area. We have everywhere. We're in 42 countries, but we do have quite a bit of women and men listening that are from that area. When they look at doing, and we've done projects in Philadelphia, Andres and I have personally worked on projects and developing, single family to new construction. I'm curious though, for women who are by themselves, right? A lot of sole investors, if you will. What are some of the first few steps that they can take? You have a background, right, of community organizing, like you're an expert in that. And it sounds like you have like this powerhouse team and a resource, certainly there in Philadelphia, which is wonderful. But we have people who are across the country who are in different areas and they do want to buy that property and they don't want to displace people, certainly, but they also want to buy that property and build their wealth and make a difference. They want both. They want to be that capitalist that's doing good. I think that's a lot of the women. So what are maybe a few of the people in the community that they can talk to, that they can, I don't know, what are some of those simple first action steps they can take in their own community?
I would invite them, to visit our website and connect with our developers. I mean, because there's nothing better than going to someone who's done it, to learn how to do it, talk to somebody who has done it or is doing it. So we have 7 development companies that are part of our first cohort of developers in the Growth Collective. 2 of them are women-owned and women-run development companies. Mosaic Developers is probably among the Black development companies in Philadelphia, probably best known and maybe
Yep.
the largest, if you would.
I know them.
The
Yep.
other one that's run has a woman in terms of the owner is Wilson Drake. Lorraine Drake and her husband own that development company, and they have a very clear niche of doing naturally occurring affordable rental and that are real quality in communities. And so they have put a model together with no subsidies of how to do that and appeal to regular working Philadelphians. When you think about how you can be an asset and how you look at real estate, so they're very clear about what's the size of the let's say property that we can construct. You know, I think their largest unit may be 13. Their project may be 13 unit. They don't do 100 or 200 unit apartment buildings. So they keep it small and manageable because that's what fits the niche of their financing and everything. But our developers go across all asset classes, mixed use and commercial, rental, owner-occupied housing, and they are putting together multi-phase projects that do what you're talking about doing. So I'll give you two examples. One of them is Healthy Town, in part, if you're familiar with Philadelphia, part of North Philadelphia, Nicetown, Tioga, adjacent to Temple Medical School. The community should be doing well, given a lot of the natural assets that are there, but high rates of health issues. I think diabetes rate is like 19% rate of diabetes. It's, high rates of unemployment. So as Anthony Miles is looking at, who's the founder of the company, is looking at that area, he and his company have designed a project that is multi-phase. It's taking on a 4 square block area and doing mixed income housing, senior housing, creating and envisioning a vertical a farm, a farmer's market, and a healthcare hub linked to entrepreneurial space. So it has 5, 6 different moving parts that are part of a holistic vision for this neighborhood. And so he's brought in Temple Medical School, he's brought in some of the foundations, he's working with all of the community organizations to design this project. So it's not a developer coming from the outside saying, here's come to these 2 community meetings, we'll show you our design and we're going to get started. It's being done in cooperation with the community, taking input from the other stakeholders and getting their buy-in. And it's not easy. I mean, this is something he's been at for at least 5, 6 years now, and it's still building out. So he's investing the time and energy. So I would give you that as one example. And a similar kind of project going on in West Philly, where another one of our developers on a smaller scale is doing kind of like 3 interconnected complementary projects in Parkside, right off the park, intergenerational housing, a healthy food hub, and again, a health access, like preventative health access center connected to open space, green spaces, and the park. And so really kind of thinking about the natural environment you're in, but also the social, cultural assets you're working with. But I think most importantly, not being afraid to talk with, connect with, and even in some cases, negotiate with the communities you're coming into, because they have to be a part of the process and not be seen as sort of like the last step of the process, or that they are, and I hate to use these terms, but almost like, we're coming into the natives are restless kind of attitude that we are now interlopers. You really have to feel that you are part of this community and not coming in from the outside. I think those are some of the things I'm learning as I look at what our developers are doing and how they're approaching it. And then we as the Growth Collective really are being that intermediary to bring other helpful support, again, whether that's elected officials or whether that's foundations or maybe larger development companies. We're sort of that intermediary that helps to strengthen their hand and their work and their projects.
I wanted to talk in terms of the impact, right? Because we've seen the impact of things, communities that were gentrified, that the negative impact, what it's not working. So in terms of the positive impact, you mentioned about the trauma of not seeing the street or the neighbors that you grew up at. What are the positive impacts of programs like this can make, not just an individual, but like generations to come when applied from a holistic perspective?
One of the things that we are being really intentional about is we call it our social metrics scorecard. That as we look at the projects that our developers are bringing to us, that we could potentially invest in, that we literally have a scorecard that has everything from who are going to be the owners of the project, who's working on the project, what are the outcomes, like what will it do for home ownership, will increase home ownership, what will it do around the cost of renting in this neighborhood, will it bring, let's say, a new options for a healthy food, will it make food options closer to people in that community, will they have more park space or green space? So can we literally go down a checklist and say, here are the assets and the amenities that will be added because this project's here? So that's the first step. Can we measure an outcome that is going to result because we're doing this project? And I think that's probably the most important, not just in theory, but like really, literally, stormwater management. If we put this project here and we put green infrastructure around it and you put these new plants or trees, that will help with water quality in the neighborhood. Will that help with runoff? If we do this, can now 5 more first-time home buyers afford to stay in this part of West Philadelphia or North Philadelphia or Germantown? Can now people who are working for SEPTA afford to rent an apartment here? Those are real, just tangible. So you have to be able to measure it. I would say that's the first and most important thing. Is it really tangible? Does it have tangible benefit to the community in which it's being brought? And then again, the engagement with the people who are living there, being able to help to define some of the components of what that project is. Maybe can't dictate everything because again, there are financial realities, there are constraints about the actual physical property itself, the size of it, and maybe even some of what's been there before. So, but there are ways that you can build in some of the communities, let's say, preferences and priorities. Can they be added to your vision as developer, what I want to do here? And so it's an iterative process. That's the other thing. Not coming in when this is fully designed and 100% decided, but at the earlier stages, I have this general idea, I have these general constraints, but let's see and let me hear about how I might be able to incorporate my vision with the vision of what folks who are already there. And then some of the other folks I'm going to need to bring along with me. But so that's what, again, I think we are saying as we go through this to make sure that at the end of the day, it is an asset to the neighborhood and it's not a liability. It's not a displacing piece. And again, I'm not saying all this is easy. So don't take it like, oh yeah, that all falls into place. No, sometimes it can be very hard and it takes like 5 or 6 different scenarios to come back over and over and over again before you can get it right. So.
Yeah. And I think that's where partnerships play in because, people do need to stay in their lane and they need to know if they want to achieve something with a social impact, that's a level of expertise and how to do that. Like what you're saying.
Commitment, right?
And a commitment.
There's a commitment and a will. And what we, again, as a collective have been able to do, we meet monthly, now virtually for the most part, but we will bring in different companies, agencies who have resources. Somebody what they do is green infrastructure. So we introduce them to our developers. And so they can help them understand, here's how you can build this into your project. Somebody who's an expert on energy efficiency. And so here's how you can think about doing, more affordable or alternative kind of energy resources, or building other sustainability components in your project in an affordable way. Because our developers, they have a lot on their plate. And so helping them find these partners and other experts, and they don't have to be the experts. That's the role we've been able to play as the collective, as the growth collective, myself, my partners, and then our consultants that we bring to our developers.
Yeah. And I love the idea of the social metrics scorecard. I know Andressa was getting all excited over there.
Totally excited
honestly,
about that.
I love that idea from the perspective of, before you go and buy a property, before you execute on the project, we need to have our own metrics as women, as investors. So our time, our money, our lifestyle is in check. It's more than just making money. Women, a lot of the women in our community, from our meetups to our investor con that comes out, it participates, to our Strive members, are literally not just doing this because they have nothing else to do and they just want to make some extra cash flow. Yes, that's part of it. However, it's more than that for so many women, especially women in our community, that have that yearning to support the community, yearning for creating generational wealth, yearning to make a difference and make money, hands down. But you can't do that if you don't have a laser focused, boundary oriented scorecard. If that's what I'm hearing, because it's creating the boundary of saying, what are we willing to, what's going to work for me, for the community, and not work. And I think we all kind of have that internally, but it's not written down, and it's certainly not on a scorecard. So I love that as kind of investing criteria, and create a social piece of that, everyone listening, because if you start to create that as a line item for yourself before you go and do a project, you're going to start looking for that. It's going to start to be like, what is this? So I know that's important to me, but now it's a line item on my scorecard. And I think that's a wonderful way to approach it. And because we measure what's important to us.
Exactly right.
I mean, at the end of the day,
but I think you hit the first part though. You have to start with the vision and the will. I mean, so you have to really want to do it, and it has to be important to you. It has to be a priority, and then the how gets a little easier. And we're want to help with the how. So the social metrics scorecard is helping them, the developers, with here's how I can do it.
Love that.
But I really have a drive that this is important for me to do it. It has to be a part of my project. I'm not going to come in here and displace neighborhoods. I'm not going to do. That's where it has to start. And I've really gained a great respect for our developers as the visionaries. I mean, because they're the ones that come in with I'm looking at I see dirt in front of me, but they see, like I said, a vertical farm with agriculture and farmers market. They're the visionaries. And then it's a matter of, well, how do I bring this vision to reality? So, and as the developers that have been part of your network, really being comfortable with that idea of being the visionaries and the creators, you do have that power, in a sense, to bring it forth. We know about birthing children, but bringing forth this other kind of birthing and vision, and then having the confidence and others who can support you in carrying that vision out. And I will say the final thing, the determination that we're not going to be deterred. And that's been the thing for us. There have been so many things that try to push us away from this approach, because it's not the norm. This is not how it's done in real estate, right? Yeah. Most of the time. And so to be persistent that we're not going to do it the old-fashioned way. No, we're not giving in to the easy road. That's the hard thing. That's really hard. No, I can't do that. I can't be a part of displacement. I can't. My mother and father would be, they would be turning over in their graves to see that. So there's got to be something that says, no, we're going to be part of the solution. We're not going to be part of the problem. And that is an internal thing that you really have to bring to it.
That's great. And I think that the awareness piece, right? Because people, I often I hear people saying that they want to make a social impact. But as we just discussed it right here, it's not a line item on their current projects. So just like merging, and I always want people to say, okay, if you really look, you will find opportunity. But people are not taking the time to be even aware of what it is, to have a conversation with a neighbor, to fully understand what the community looks like or needs, besides the numbers by itself. So I think conversations like this one, it's very, very important, that will trigger other conversations among different people that now are going to be looking at neighborhoods quite different. And we will talk more about this, because I love the social metric scorecard. And I think that we need to start really perpetuating that as the new norm moving forward. I think that's our job. That's our job.
What we're trying to, I want you to champion that. Absolutely. And if we can make it the norm, that goes a long way. And there are risks. I think the one thing I want to be very honest about, that is risky. Anytime you talk to people, it's risky, because everybody doesn't agree with you.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about engaging other minds and thoughts, and people will push back and, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want you to have a park here. I don't want these apartment buildings here. So there's the risk, and there is definitely a tension that you have to be comfortable working through and talking with. And that's when we talk about the competencies, and in our lens, a cultural competency of being very comfortable in these neighborhoods and communities with residents. For us, that's who we are and where we come from. So it's not a big deal. But sometimes going into uncharted waters, it's uncomfortable. And so understanding that and being willing to kind of, okay, this is going to take a minute for me to get used to this. This is new territory. And that's where I feel as I learn the financial markets. It's like, this is new territory for me, but then just getting comfortable, because the more you're in it, the easier I think it gets.
Yeah. I love that. So many great takeaways, Sandra. This has been wonderful. I'm sure we're going to be doing more with you guys and just shine the light, and that's really what we're about in our community. Is it's not just about investing or making money. It's much more than that. And that's why we have a growing community of other people who want the same. So where can the ladies listening learn more about you and follow you along your journey?
Well, the Growth Collective has a website, www.thecollectivephl.com. And that's where you can learn much more about this initiative. And if you're interested in investing, there are ways through our collective investment group for individuals as well as family offices, foundations to invest. So that's one thing. At Sandra D. Glenn, I guess is my Twitter handle. I'm not a big social media person, and I am on LinkedIn, Sandra D. Glenn on LinkedIn. I think that's the other way you find me. And my email is sandra@thecollectivephl.com. So if people want to just be in touch with me, closer to the old-fashioned way, you can reach out to me via email, Sandra@thecollectivephl.com.
That's great. All this information you guys can find on our show notes. And now we're going to transition to our fabulous 3 questions. Sandra, the first one is about a book that made a great impact in your life. What would you say?
Oh, man. Well, in the context of this program, I have to be very, very honest. The book that led me to start the collective was the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. And that is, as they say, the God honest truth. That is the truth. The book on the rebuilding of the wall of Jerusalem after the displacement, if you would, of the exile of the people of Israel to Babylon, and their return, and their community had been destroyed, and the need to rebuild it. And Nehemiah was the builder who came back. And that was really the impetus for the collective, and looking at our neighborhoods and thinking about who's going to come and rebuild them. So as the most pertinent book in my life for this work is the book of Nehemiah.
Awesome. What is the most transformational routine that you do to create a financially free and balanced life, whatever balance means to you?
Well, I'm still working to get financially free. Okay, so I am a work in progress. I love working out physically. I work out like 6 to 7 days a week. And so this idea, discipline, the order and discipline that comes from my physical workouts, about there is a routine and there's some things I have to do day in and day out to get to my desired result. And sometimes I get bored with it, and sometimes it gets on my nerves, and sometimes it gets in the way. But that discipline I use to apply to other things. I have to sit down and I have to go through. We have to meet our partners. We have to meet every week. We have to go through and review our development strategies, and these follow-ups have to happen. Today, I have to get this list of emails out. They have to go out. So that discipline, I think, has been something that has been very helpful in carrying out this work.
Last question. Which women, famous or not, has inspired you the most?
I have to say two, and they are very different. The first is my grandmother, my mother's mother, maternal mother, and we lived with her growing up. And she taught me the idea of being independent, but kind and loving at the same time. She was extremely independent, but her commitment to family, her love for her family, unquestionable. And so that kind of gentleness with that strong independence, that balance, that it was something that she showed me. And then the other one is a college mentor, a woman from Australia named Dr. Vilma Hunt, who was the first woman epidemiologist I ever met. And my background was I was supposed to be a veterinarian, and then I was going to go into public health and occupational health. But what she showed me was how to walk with great confidence in a male-dominated world, and be very comfortable who I was, and being a woman, and but still be very clear and strong and confident in that arena, and my science head was okay. The idea of being structured and kind of like orderly and rational, that's okay as a woman, but it didn't make me any less a woman. So I would say she was someone else who had a great impact on kind of my development.
Wonderful.
Sandra, thank you so much for being on our show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your journey, and the work that you're doing with your partners is really important, and excited to shine the light on that. So it inspires everyone listening, and more of that happens in our world and our community. So thank you for all you do, and appreciate you being on our show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sandra.
Take care. All righty.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to receive updates on our next interviews, go to our website, therealestateinvestor.com. There, you can subscribe to our show, become part of our investor community, and get updates on upcoming episodes.
If you like our show, please share it with other women who would benefit. And don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And as always, we encourage you to take one action as a result of today's show and put it into motion so you can live both a financially free and balanced life. Thanks for spending time with us.
Ciao.